I have another question from HISLOP Coaching. I don't know what that's not someone's name, probably a username. It says, I'm interested in the balance between looking at the data like VO2 max and heart rate versus how an athlete feels in training. Can you comment on RPE versus scientific data? That's an interesting dichotomy between how your body feels and what the gadgets are telling you. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a mental skills question. Great athletes use all the modern equipment to collect data and to evaluate the value of a training session after this training session is complete, or the coaches use that information. But the athletes themselves very much operate on feel, especially in races. They don't need a lot of feedback from information. In fact, this feedback sometimes creates a ceiling and a limit to performance. The scientific community is absolutely at opposite ends when it comes to that kind of concept of whether RPE is the truest. We do know from lab testing that there is no better way to test your level of fatigue than how you feel. If you feel tired, you are tired. And the physiological markers are not necessarily conducive to that. Very often we'll look at lactate at the beginning of a test and it's very, very high, and then later in a test the athlete is going much, much faster and their lactate level is very low, but their RPE might have been gradually increasing as the test goes on. So I know some scientists are working on mathematical models that are based exclusively on RPE and getting some really, really good results. And I know some other scientists that think that's complete and utter nonsense and the numbers don't lie. But at the end of the day, special high-level performances within an athlete are associated with certain feelings, and then those feelings can be correlated with your individual numbers, whether those be watts or velocity or heart rate or lactate. So again, like any of these things, I would use a combination of the two. Some athletes have very, very strong resistance to discomfort and might rely more on equipment, and other athletes have very, very strong minds and the equipment tells them they're getting too close to their limits and that might limit them. So determine what kind of athlete you are and use those things to empower you.
Okay. And Kevin, interesting when you get into the sport of triathlon, everyone I think goes through this progression as an athlete of being enamored of all the modern numbers that you can gather on your sessions, and then you start to get overwhelmed as an athlete if you're self-coached or even working with a coach. And then at what point as a pro athlete do you just kind of throw away the gadgets or at least not look at them until the end of the workout? How does that work for you? Because when you race, it's just all about how you feel, right?
Well, I mean, there are some days where I just have to kind of, throw away the Garmin or the heart rate monitor or whatever, and I can kind of tell going into it, whether it's a bike ride or a run, and I'm not feeling very good, and I call those RPE days. So it's either going to be like I'm using the Garmin and I see the numbers and the numbers are good, and I'll keep going with that. Or if I'm not liking the numbers and I want to finish the workout anyways, I just kind of go on how I feel. It's like if it's supposed to be half Ironman, like rate of perceived effort, I'll just kind of go with how it feels and just turn the Garmin off. And then if I feel bad enough, if I'm overtrained or if I feel like I've done too much and just not getting the workout done, I won't do the workout. It's just kind of like go straight home.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things for athletes is being married to their equipment and not their own feelings. So
yeah, you definitely have to have a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of like having your coach on your shoulder when you're out there. If you don't have a coach on site, you have to just be your own. You have to be able to call the workout if things aren't going well.
Yeah. Bobby, I noticed in some of your training photos from your film that you ride the bike next to athletes a lot. How does that work? Are you able to sense without looking at the data exactly what the athletes are feeling?
I cheat. I either have the athlete's Garmin on so that I see what they're doing and I'm close enough to have a look at their heart rate and so on. But to me, the greatest value of being on the bike is keeping the athlete at the right level of focus. And there's been a number of coaches that have written about this. You can do it on a treadmill too, but I've seen this so many times on the bike where you actually say to the athlete, all right, you're running at the speed you want to be running at. You're moving along really effectively here. Let's see if you can now lower your heart rate, lower your RPE, but maintain the same pace. And it is phenomenal how good these athletes are at being able to do that, because they just find out that their focus was slightly off. They were thinking about, maybe how uncomfortable this was, or they were maybe thinking about an outcome, or thinking about having a bad day, as Kevin was saying. All right, but as soon as you have them focusing on, okay, the pace is correct, or you need to pick the pace up or slow it down a little bit, and then you say to them, now see if you can make this easier, because that's actually the whole purpose of training. With athletes like Kevin, they very quickly get to the speed and the neuromuscular level that they want to be doing. It's all then a question for how long can they maintain it. Kevin can run 10-mile repeats as fast as he wants to run a half marathon in a 70.3. All right. The thing is for him to be able to string them together. So the easier, the more economical, the more efficient he can run the pace that he needs to run at, the better. And so the value of riding next to an athlete or being next to an athlete on a treadmill and shifting their focus around has been proven in many studies to be extremely effective. And the opposite is true too. You can have the athlete focus on things that make them less efficient and less capable.
Yeah.